and civil society, thank you for joining us this evening for our Youth Perspective Side event. As I mentioned before, my name is Stella Rose, and I am the Youth Advisor at Reverse the Trend, the youth initiative of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. As the Youth Advisor of RTT, I wear many hats. I oversee RTT operational functions, I assist various chapters, I help facilitate organizational initiatives, and I also help to amplify and represent the youth voice. Now, I was passing through customs and disclosing to the agents the purpose of my travel here in Geneva. I proudly told him that I was here in Switzerland for work. Like many other young people in this room, this is my first real work trip. And he then glanced at my university sweatshirt that I was wearing at the time and kind of tilts his head and goes, what kind of work? To be very candid with all of you, as a young person and a young woman, I usually walk away from presentations, statements, and interventions in the disarmament realm, hoping that my sentiments did not fall on deaf ears, that I was taken seriously, hoping that my pleas for a future free of nuclear weapons were taken to heart, and hoping that the youth perspective will make you proud. Make us proud. This is a sentiment that I took to heart, and one that I impress upon you. Though we cannot rewrite our nuclear past, we can change the course for a nuclear-free future. The UN projects that today there are around 1.2 billion youth people, a population ranging from the ages 15 to 24. Therefore, the youth are the rising class of vital stakeholders within their inherited world, and subsequently within disarmament diplomacy. Young people shoulder a critical role in raising awareness surrounding the threat from weapons of mass destruction, the environmental consequences of weapons use, testing, and maintenance, and ultimately the humanitarian consequences of the weapons on gender, health, and equality. Youth must rise up and change the world, our guiding motto at RTT, and practice at NAPF. And well, that's exactly what we're doing here today and over the next week. I thank you for your time, and I would like to pass it to Sarah Vernon. Sarah is a master's student at the International Development Studies at the Graduate Institute and event coordinator of the Human Rights, Conflict, and Peace Initiative. And as one of our co-sponsors, I would like you to give her a warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Stella, for the introductions. Distinguished guests, good evening. As Stella said, I am a student here, but I'm also part of the initiative who partner with the organization for this event tonight. And it's an honor and a privilege for me to be here and to welcome you to this significant event on such an important topic. Here at the Graduate Institute, this gathering marks an important milestone in our collective efforts towards a more peaceful and just world. Our focus today is on one of the most pressing issues of our time, nuclear disarmament, as Stella said. In an age where the threat of nuclear weapons continues to loom over our global community, it is imperative that we foster a dialogue that bridges generations, bringing together disarmament experts, as we have today, as well as youth that needs to clearly be engaged every day in these kind of important matters. By creating this platform today, we aim to facilitate meaningful discussions and interactions that not only educate, but also inspire and mobilize actions towards a nuclear-free world. The collaboration between our initiative and the Foundation underscores a shared vision that peace and human rights are fundamentally interconnected. The devastating impact of nuclear weapons transcends borders and generations. It is a threat to our collective human security and a violation of human rights, as well as a grave challenge to global peace. Today's event is a testament to our belief that the voices of young people are crucial in this dialogue. Young people bring fresh perspective, innovative ideas, and an unwavering commitment to change. We are the future leaders who will carry the mantle of disarmament and peace. Our engagement with experts will help to build a robust, informed, and dynamic movement capable of addressing complexities of nuclear disarmament. As we gather here today, we are reminded of the immense responsibility that we hold. It is our duty to ensure that the horrors of nuclear warfare are never repeated. This requires not only policy changes, but also a shift of consciousness, driven by education and advocacy. Geneva, with its rich diplomacy and human rights advocacy, provides the perfect backdrop for this critical conversation. Therefore, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation and its youth initiative, the Reverse the Trend, as well as for their partnership and unwavering dedication to this cause. And I would also like to thank the mission of Kiribati, the Marshallese Educational Initiative, as well as all the panelists and experts that we have today for their invaluable insights and experiences. Most importantly, I thank all the youth participants tonight and the wider Geneva community for your enthusiasm and commitment to this crucial issue. Thank you, and I wish you all a fruitful discussion.
His statement, make his recollections during on 29th of August, which was proclaimed the International Day on the against nuclear tests. So we have so many issues. We are the health issues, environmental issues. The grand massif of land, you would say it's size of Denmark or Israel is being removed from the agricultural economic turnover in our country. You can imagine how huge it is.
I studied about the nuclear testing, about the nuclear energy. Studied it. I'm not an expert, I'm not a professor, but I was a student of that. I'm still following, I'm still reading, and the film you showed about nuclear winter, that is pretty scary. But and I think it's true, isn't it? The film's been verified. I hope the scientists decided to verify the information. We don't want to over-scare people. I don't believe in journalism which kind of twist things. You should just make it more interesting and then stir up people, stir up trouble sometimes. I have difficulty with journalism nowadays. Very, very bad. When I speak to them, they twist my story to what they want the public to read. But let me tell you something.
Because at some point I realized that scientists were part of the problem of bringing nuclear weapons into the world, and that scientists needed to become part of the solution. And so I'm really pleased, as Stella mentioned, to be on the scientific advisory group to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which I furthermore believe is our best and possibly only hope for a world free of nuclear weapons. And I'm very grateful to the Republic of Kiribati, which actually nominated me to be on the scientific advisory group. So I'll just highlight just two things on how scientists can help keep the treaty moving forward. One of the big issues is, of course, verification that pertains to how do we know if a country has actually, say a country says they are joining the treaty, they say they're eliminating their nuclear weapons, how do we verify that? So that's one large area of research. Another large area of research is pertains to the humanitarian provisions that the treaty aims to provide through Articles 6 and 7. This is on victim assistance and environmental remediation. And what does that mean, and how can we best support the states parties in really bringing what I think of collectively as nuclear justice for the people that have been impacted by nuclear weapons testing and use. And I'm just gonna say one last thing. The video that you saw, I've seen that video actually many times, and the part where it says that a nuclear weapons attack is all of these things at once, and it names the earthquake and wildfire and hurricane and nuclear accident all at once but worse. That part really always gets to me, and that's talking about a single nuclear weapon explosion. And I want to just say one more thing that we sort of have from science. People often ask, and it's related to the video as well. In the video, they say the probability of such an attack has grown higher. I'll just give you one estimate from a very famous scientist from Stanford University. His name is Marty Hellman, who estimates that in any given year, and he says that these estimates are for before the Ukraine war, so he says they're now even higher. But before the Ukraine war, he estimates 1% per year the probability that a nuclear weapon is used. That may not even sound, I don't know if it sounds to you like a lot or not a lot. But what that means is that over the course of a child born today, if they are to live for 80 years, there's more than a 50% chance that during their lifetime, there will be such an explosion. And so I'll just end there, and happy to connect with anyone. We have 3 more wonderful young panelists, and I just want to make sure they all get a chance to just tell you a little bit about themselves. So thank you so much.
As they go through, but I would like to pass the floor to Benetik and a little bit about him. He is the executive director of the Marshallese Educational Initiative, or MEI, a nonprofit based in Springdale, Arkansas, where the highest concentration of Marshallese reside outside of the home islands. Born on Majuro Atoll, Madison migrated to the Ozark Mountains of Arkansas with his family at the age of 6. His work at MEI includes leading efforts to raise awareness of the biological, ecological, and cultural consequences of the nuclear testing legacy on the Marshallese homelands, as well as the impact of climate change. Benetik has spoken at myriad conferences and events in the US and internationally, including the United Nations General Assembly. I am going to give the floor now to Benetik to just enlighten you on his fabulous perspectives, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stella. Good evening, everyone. I first want to acknowledge the presence of course, His Excellency Ambassador Tito. I also want to acknowledge Marshall Islands Deputy Permanent Representative Sam Longley, who's also here with us today. And then, of course, acknowledge our organizers for today's event, and of course, nuclear frontline community members who are here with us today. So several nations and people know firsthand the devastating impact of nuclear weapons, and my homeland, the Marshall Islands, stands with them in solidarity. Between 1946 and 1958, the United States used the Marshall Islands as a testing ground for nuclear weapons. Within 6 months of the bombing of Japan, the United States selected Bikini Atoll in the northern Marshall Islands as the first location to test nuclear weapons far away from U.S. borders. U.S. Naval Commodore Ben Wyatt told the Marshallese people that the tests were for the good of all mankind and to ensure world peace. The people had no reason to disbelieve the Americans. They had just liberated their lands during the war. Still, the people had no real say in the matter. They packed their belongings and were removed to a nearby island. Within a matter of weeks, the people were starving. The first U.S. tests on Bikini were conducted 78 years ago this month, July of 1946. The highly publicized test captured the world's attention. The image of the mushroom cloud rising above the water in Bikini Lagoon with palm trees in the foreground became iconic. In the United States, songs were written about the atomic bomb, from gospel music focusing on the end of the world to Shaboom, a rock and roll band's attempt to capture the sound of the bomb. A French fashion designer created a swimsuit he claimed was as small as an atom. He named it the Bikini. And all the while, the Marshallese people were suffering. This year, on March 1st, we mark the 70th anniversary of the Castle Bravo detonation, the largest nuclear device at 15 megatons, tested by the United States. The detonation rained down fallout on inhabited atolls throughout the Marshall Islands. Rongola Atoll received the highest levels of fallout. Not understanding the dangers the white powdery substance held, the children of Rongola played in it. The fine white powder covered Marshallese bodies, food, and water supplies, and within hours, people began exhibiting signs of radiation sickness. 3 days later, U.S. soldiers evacuated the inhabitants and relocated them to a nearby island. They remained under the care of the U.S. military and the Atomic Energy Commission doctors who monitored them in a top-secret study called Project 4.1 to measure the impact radiation had on human beings. The study was conducted without the consent of the Marshallese people. The US tested 66 other known nuclear weapons on my homeland, and some in the 10+ megaton range. The vast majority were detonated between 1954 and 1958. And this was shortly after the Marshallese leaders sent a petition to the United Nations asking the US to halt their nuclear weapons test. And so the response was to test 50 plus more nuclear weapons between this time, 1954 and 1958. And so the combined destructive force of radiation contamination unleashed by these nuclear weapons vaporized islands and rendered entire atolls unsuitable for human habitation. Radioactive particles from these tests also circled the globe. Today, the testing and its aftermath continue to have devastating and ongoing consequences for the health, culture, and the environment of the Marshallese people. Generations of Marshallese have developed cancer-related illnesses due to exposure to ionizing radiation from fallout from weapons tests and residual radioactive sources. Over the past 3 years, I have been traveling around the world to raise awareness of the devastating impact of the nuclear testing legacy on the Marshallese people. In that same time span, I lost 3 of my grandparents to cancer and other nuclear-related illnesses. In fact, I went to the Marshall Islands this year in January with my family to bury 2 of them. They were all part of the children of the nuclear age, a generation of Marshallese children who were born or lived their early childhood lives uninformed about the dangers of radiation exposure and the contamination of our atolls and islands by nuclear fallout. Women and children were most vulnerable to radiation exposure. And as we all know, nuclear-related health issues are intergenerational. The nuclear testing program produced a litany of radiation-related illnesses. On the highly contaminated atolls, women had miscarriages or gave birth to severely deformed babies with translucent skin or without bones. Having no words to describe them, they called them jellyfish babies. Some women birthed what was described as clumps of grapes. Some babies had elongated heads, and so birth defects and cancers are common among my people. So too are funerals for young Marshallese who passed due to complications from diabetes, an illness unknown in the Marshall Islands before the US occupation and nuclear testing caused forced relocation and drastic changes to the Marshallese diet. Now, the Marshallese people have some of the highest rates of diabetes in the world. In the US, the Marshallese diaspora suffers from rates of diabetes 400% more than the general US population. Before colonization by the Germans, the Japanese, and most consequentially the United States, our people were not without illness, but they lived relatively long, healthy lives with a diet rich in seafood and cultivated crops like coconut and pandanus. With the US occupation, our lands, from which comes our identity, along with cultural knowledge, were devalued. The tests also poisoned our lands. Throughout the testing period, the US encouraged our people to eat processed food, first because they viewed them as modern and better than the traditional ways of people they openly called savages. Then later, after nuclear testing irradiated our lands and food sources, it became a necessity. The Marshall Islands, a low-lying atoll nation, faces the dual threat of the nuclear legacy and the climate crisis, with its land at risk of disappearing due to rising sea levels. The Renegoma nuclear waste site on Aniweather Atoll, which is the other nuclear testing site in the Marshall Islands, is deteriorating, leaking nuclear contaminants into the land and the Pacific Ocean, posing a serious threat to the environment and the health of the residents, especially the Marshallese community on Aniweather Atoll. In 1986, the US and the Marshalls signed a bilateral agreement, the Compact of Free Association, which was renewed this year, and it provides for minimal assistance to the Marshallese government in exchange for sweeping US military rights to Marshallese lands and waters. It encourages Marshallese to migrate to the US, but access to health care, one of the primary reasons for Marshallese to relocate, is riddled with challenges. The compact also fails to address the nuclear legacy. The Marshall Islands government expects the U.S. to take responsibility for its actions, but the U.S. has consistently refused to do so. Unfortunately, all nuclear armed states, in the name of deterrence and national security, harm their citizens and the land of other nations. For many frontline communities, seeking nuclear justice at the international level is the only viable option. As a Pacific Islander and frontline community member, I feel it is important to share and listen to personal experiences and stories of individuals around the world who have been directly impacted by the nuclear legacy. The case for a nuclear-free world is not just about theories or treaties or wars and weapons. It's about people and their stories. Stories from nuclear frontline communities can help shape policies to achieve nuclear justice and a nuclear-free and livable planet for all. Earlier this year, NEI brought together affected community members and invited scholars and nuclear non-proliferation advocates to share perspectives and listen to one another. We need more occasions to listen, especially to frontline community members. It is my hope that all nations, with the help of young people around the world, adopt the TPNW and rid the world of nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons do not generate world peace and security. They are expensive and dangerous to human health and the environment. Let's continue to dedicate ourselves and advocate for and with nuclear frontline communities to the cause of nuclear abolishment and the memory of so many who have gone before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Benedict, for your vulnerability and just being an exemplary representative on behalf of your community. We're going to move forward. I'm going to pass the floor to Agram Sentinova, who is a disarmament youth leader and a third-generation survivor of Soviet nuclear testing. Currently, she is a project manager at the Berlin-based Center for Feminist Foreign Policy and works on peace and security with a specific focus on nuclear disarmament, anti-feminism in authoritarian countries, and feminist recovery in Ukraine. Agram is also a producer and author of the Nuclear Collateral Damage podcast series and was recognized by Forbes 30 Under 30. Please welcome Agram.
Thank you so much. Salam Sizbe, dear distinguished guests. It is my great honor to be here today and to speak as a Kazakh youth representative and a member of Nuclear Frontline Community. Before I start, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers. I'm very delighted here, and also I would like to congratulate, using this opportunity, the Kazakhstan government for the successfully kicking off the second preparatory committee. When Christian invited me to speak, I was visiting my family in my hometown, Semey, which is formerly known as Semipalatinsk. I was then thinking of how to approach my speech, and I decided to dedicate it to my family. First, I would like to share why revisiting the past is important in order to assess the present and envision the future. It is quite simple and might sound trivial, but we currently see the outcomes and the impact of past crimes and atrocities influencing our lives today. The chair has already shared the history of nuclear legacy of Kazakhstan, so I would not focus on it now. His Excellency Mr. Rakhane Rahmatullahi told us about the impact of nuclear testing that it had on its people and land, so I would like to focus on something else. By going to the past, I would like to share how the past history of my family made me advocate for the world free from nuclear weapons. I would also like to point out that for 40 years, since 1949 until 1989, most of the local population lived in ignorance of what was being done on their sacred land, to their bodies, to their families and children. And in this case, ignorance was far from being a bliss, but rather a curse that was forcefully implanted by the dominant and hegemonic power which used the unity of all people at the core of its ideology, but still utilized people at the margins to the nuclear experiment, which served as to the common goal in the nuclear arms race, and then resulted in this hemorrhaging wound, which we now call our nuclear legacy. Advocating for a world free from nuclear weapons and seeking nuclear justice and redress is not only about raising awareness. For us, nuclear frontline communities, it's much about reflecting on our nuclear legacy, on the intergenerational trauma. For many years, speaking about nuclear testing and legacy and harm caused to us was a taboo. A taboo to share that children were born with disabilities and or genetic conditions. A taboo to share the fear of the unknown for women carrying fetuses and getting pregnant. A taboo to demand adequate reparations from those responsible for this harm and unbearable suffering. An American feminist and activist, Audre Lorde, in her book Sister Outsider, rethinks on the question of silence in her life and how the silence never protected her, and that a person might not feel whole if they remain silent, because one little piece inside of you wants to be spoken out, and if it's not spoken out, then it would go madder and madder. There, it's important to not ignore that part and ensure that the transformation of silence into language and action becomes an act of self-revelation. Breaking silence might cause fear of judgment, of censorship, of recognition, and visibility. My self-revelation comes mostly from the silence in my family related to nuclear legacy, since the topic has not been discussed in every household, including mine. Today, for the first time since I joined this field in 2021, I decided to share the impact that nuclear testing has had on my family and on myself. And this decision comes as a result of my engagement with nuclear frontline communities, including you, Benedict. My grandfather passed away from lung cancer when he was 52 years old in 1963. He was a worker who was responsible for the repairment of the rail tracks since the World War II, but also from 1949 until 1962, until he was diagnosed with cancer. And we all know that in 1961 and 62, there were a lot of atmospheric and air tests. My grandmother passed away at 65 after having mental health issues, which we all know that ionizing radiation impacts mental health. My uncle committed suicide when he was 35 years old, and he lived 30 kilometers from nuclear test site. My grandfather passed away from liver cancer in his 70s. My mother has a genetic condition that resulted in an autoimmune disorder which passed on to me, and at the age of 3, I almost passed away from the complication of my cardiovascular system. The visibility I chose today makes me vulnerable, but in my vulnerability, I find strength. In my strengths, I find resilience. In my resilience, I find solidarity with nuclear frontline communities around the world. I would also like to focus next part on the work of decolonial feminist philosopher Maria Lugones. She puts two ideas together. It's the first one, resistance against multiple oppressions and coalition against multiple oppressions. So what I believe that what we are all doing in nuclear frontline communities, governments like Kazakhstan, governments like Kiribati, we are resisting to multiple oppressions. We're talking about militarism, about colonialism, about racism. We are uniting and making coalitions against the same oppressions. And I applaud again the activism of Kazakhstan and Kiribati on Article 6 and 7 of TPNW. I would like to close my speech with a quote from Setsuko Thurlow, a hibakusha. When she was seeking a way out from the school destroyed by the US atomic bomb in 1945, a man trying to help her said, "Don't give up. Keep pushing. I'm trying to free you. See the light coming through that opening? Crawl towards it as quickly as you can." So for me, the struggle for a world free from nuclear weapons feels like crawling towards a light that at times seems so unreachable. The light has been dimmed by the mere creation of the atomic bomb, the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and hundreds of nuclear tests. As the third-generation survivor of the Soviet nuclear testing in my hometown of Kazakhstan, I cannot help but wonder how we all define peace in a world with nuclear weapons. Sitting in a room with hundreds of diplomats speaking about nuclear weapons made me reflect on how we, as human beings, are responsible for maintaining peace in this world. And in these reflections, there is no place for nuclear weapons. I, and I hope young people, stand firm on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for letting that little part of you that is dying to speak out. It changes lives and perspectives, and as woman to woman, that Audre Lorde reference, like that hit very close to home, so thank you for your remarks. We're going to move to our last youth representative. We are going to move to Brock Walker, our NAPF and RTT Nuclear Justice Campaign Manager. Brock is from Las Vegas, Nevada. He recently graduated from the dual Bachelor of Arts program between Sciences Po and Columbia University. In the program, he attained 2 interdisciplinary degrees, economic sociology and economics, as well as political science. Throughout his studies, he has extensively studied nuclear testing and international norms surrounding test bans. He is passionate about nuclear justice and previously participated in RTT's youth delegation to the second meeting of states parties to the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Brock also moderated the Nuclear Justice Campaign launch event, and it is my pleasure to give my colleague the floor for our last youth remark.
Thank you, Stella. I'd like to extend my deep gratitude and note what an honor it is to speak before diplomats, activists, advocates, and frontline community members who are gathered here this evening. It's also a deep honor to join this panel today. Today's panel is indispensable in understanding the youth perspectives on the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons. As the amazing moderator and my colleague has already noted, I was born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada. Vegas may be known for its glamorous strip, its city of sin, but many do not know it lies just 65 miles south of the Nevada National Security Site, formerly known as the Nevada Test Site. This location is the site of the most nuclear tests in the world, with over 928 weapons tested there from 1951 to 1992. The 100 atmospheric and 828 underground tests have left a profound impact on the region. Ionizing radiation and fallout from these tests spread across the region, affecting downwind communities in Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, and in Nevada. Children were left to play outside during recess when government officials knew the fallout would endanger them. Cows in Utah ingested iodine-131, which had settled in the grass, contaminating their milk. Those who consumed this milk experienced increased incidence of thyroid cancer, leukemia, and other forms of cancer. When testing moved underground in 1963, the U.S. government conducted nuclear weapons tests at or under the water table, contaminating the groundwater used for drinking and farming for the communities near the test site. This is but one example of how a nuclear weapon state has harmed, and we must not let them wash their hands of our community's devastation. The Western Shoshone Nation, the Navajo First Nation, and many indigenous communities in the western U.S. have been particularly impacted by the nuclear testing at the Nevada test site. They're especially vulnerable to cancers and other illnesses resulting from radiation exposure due to their lack of access to healthcare infrastructure. Furthermore, the test site and proposed Yucca Mountain Nuclear Waste Repository are situated on ancestral Western Shoshone land, exposing the vile colonialist nature of the nuclear legacy. This year, the United States abstained on a resolution entitled Addressing the Legacy of Nuclear Weapons. This resolution requests states to submit their views on victims-assisted environmental assessment and remediation. In its submission, the U.S. claimed that any enduring impacts of nuclear testing have been properly addressed. In reality, there has never been an official epidemiological study conducted on the health impact of nuclear testing in the western U.S. In addition, Bede Kabua's Madison remark and Dr. Ibn Ahu's studies demonstrate the Marshall Islands continue to experience the impacts of nuclear testing conducted by the U.S. Meanwhile, the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, or RECA, an act which has never included affected communities in the Marshall Islands, has expired. Enacted in 1990, 45 years after Trinity, this legislation provided monetary compensation that has proven inadequate in covering the exorbitant health costs associated with the treatment of radiation-related illnesses. RICA also did not include any environmental remediation provisions. Not only does the United States no longer have any plan to address the legacy of nuclear weapons, the government continues to make no attempt to study the enduring impacts of nuclear testing and actively denies their existence. RICA was not extended because of its price tag, an insignificant amount in comparison to the multi-trillions the United States has spent and will spend on maintaining, upgrading, and testing their stockpile. The story of nuclear weapons is deeply tied to my personal connection to my home and community. Growing up, I sought out and listened to individuals who were downwind of nuclear testing. My stepmother was at the test site in 1992 for the last test conducted by the United States and was responsible for conducting an environmental review of testing's impact on the region. My stepmother, father, and mother all worked on the Yucca Mountain Nuclear Waste Repository to determine its safety for the communities in the region. Today, my father tests groundwater wells in and around the Nevada test site to determine the level of tritium contamination that has seeped into neighboring water supplies. These experiences sparked my personal interest into nuclear weapons and their impacts. In May of this year, I helped to launch a nuclear justice campaign of RTT, the Youth Initiative of NAPF. This is a collaborative initiative with frontline communities and allies to raise awareness about nuclear justice. A major focus of the campaign is to provide a platform for frontline communities, especially as it relates to Articles 6 and 7 of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and its International Trust Fund. Communities affected by displacement, public health crises, and damaged environments must play an instrumental role in developing a framework for victims' assistance and environmental remediation. Diplomats may understand how to negotiate the provisions of the International Trust Fund, but affected communities must be involved in these issues that are of critical importance to them. My experiences working on the campaign and growing up in a household tied with the nuclear legacy have highlighted the unique and indispensable perspective of youth and nuclear justice. Youth from affected communities experience and understand the intergenerational impacts of nuclear testing, including radiation from related genetic damage and psychological trauma. Displacement from ancestral lands affects their ability to relate to their history and culture. Environmental degradation threatens their present and future ability to live a healthy and prosperous life. Our generation not only inherits the nuclear legacy inflicted upon us by previous generations of irresponsible and self-interested actors, but youth are responsible for reminding and advocating to prevent any future nuclear testing. The nuclear powers are once again threatening to test and returning to their Cold War rhetoric. They continually deny any enduring impact to the communities they wreak havoc upon, and in the same sentence, know how necessary it is to return to nuclear testing. Their moral bankruptcy threatens to eradicate our future and burdens us with a heavy responsibility to prevent future nuclear testing. The involvement of young people at this PrepCom fills me with hope and inspiration. The unwavering determination of those with us today to advocate for affected communities, to hold nuclear powers accountable, and to mitigate the enduring harms of the nuclear legacy stands as our first line of defense. Together, we are forging a path towards a safe, healthy, and prosperous future for all. Thank you.
Thank you to all the panelists, and thank you for your patience and your engagement in this panel. I am going to concede and give the remaining part of this panel to Mr. Christian Chobanu, the Policy and Advocacy Coordinator of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation and co-founder and project coordinator for Reverse the Trend, Save Our People, Save Our Planet, as you all have heard, the youth initiative of NAPF. He is a Kim Koo Fellow at the Korea Society as well, and has been in nuclear disarmament since 2010. He's also presently serving as an advisor on the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons for the Permanent Mission of Kiribati, where he works extensively with the co-chairs, and welcoming him back to his alma mater. Christian holds a Master's of Arts in Political Science from the Graduate Institute of Geneva, as well as Non-Proliferation and Terrorism Studies from the Middlebury Institute of International Studies in Monterey, California. Christian, I will let you take over. Thank you all so much.
It is true that I graduated from the Institute way back in 2012. A long time ago. I did not have this building. When I was a student, I was somewhere else, but I'm so glad that it has really grown and flourished so much. So I'm just going to be very quick in my remarks because I know that everyone, really wants to know. So I'll just, really just talk about our, youth engagement. As Brock has mentioned, we recently launched our nuclear justice campaign. We have many of our interns in the back of the room and over here who have really been at the forefront on nuclear justice, engaging with diplomats, organizing events, engaging in social media, and working very, very closely with both Dr. Ivana Hughes and myself in terms of amplifying their voices, which is really critical. In terms of what's being done regarding nuclear legacy issues, last year in the UN General Assembly First Committee, there was a resolution that both Kiribati and Kazakhstan, as well as like-minded states, introduced. And it was the first ever resolution on nuclear justice. And it was very big to have that at the UN. Certain nuclear weapon states tried to campaign against the resolution because they're worried about the repercussions, especially in terms of references that they would have to acknowledge their responsibility and also provide technical, financial, scientific information. Many of the medical files about the victims are stored in the archives of the nuclear weapon states, and they're refusing to release that information to the affected communities and states. And which is why, as Ambassador Sito mentioned, it's so important that we have scientists go into different affected communities and conduct radiological tests to determine how contaminated the environment is and what's happening, because that information simply is not accessible. Regarding the resolution, there's also a section, and Brock mentioned this, in terms of the UN Secretary General's report on addressing the legacy of nuclear weapons. There was an invitation for all states to submit. The United States submitted its report. You heard from Brock. The United Kingdom also submitted a report regarding their involvement in Kiribati and claiming that that everything is, they've done their survey, they helped, remediate the environment, and everything is safe and sound and no one should worry, basically. That was the quick summary of their submission. And they were very proud to say that they voted against the resolution with France. So Kiribati submitted its report and has been pushing hard on through issuing joint statements, a working paper at the NPT PrepCom, and really pushing the fight to really gain recognition regarding nuclear justice. And very recently, Ambassador Sito delivered a joint statement that was delivered on behalf of Kiribati, Kazakhstan, the Marshall Islands. And it was in Egypt, Philippines, and several other states, and the Pacific, most of the Pacific small island states as well. But what was very unique about that statement was that for the first time ever, the states reached out to the youth from these communities. So there were opportunities for instance, Benedict to provide his input and views, as well as the stock organization that Akron is associated with, and we're very thankful for those contributions because it's so important that states work very closely with young people. Most governments don't do that, but Kiribati and Kazakhstan and the more progressive ones are really trying to incorporate young people's views in their statements and organize events where they can share their views. And this is all leading to, and this was mentioned also by others, the establishment of an international trust fund to help the victims of nuclear testing. This is being discussed, it's a live issue that's being discussed by the state parties of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And there are a lot of questions regarding whether they will accept financial contributions from non-TPNW states. That's something that's being discussed currently. For instance, whether they should allow funds from Japan, for instance, into the trust fund, even though Japan's not a member of the treaty. And this is something, as it's being developed, it's really important for young people to have their voices. And very recently, thanks to the civil society coordinator of the TPNW, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, there was an opportunity for Kiribati and Kazakhstan to engage with Japanese organizations and survivors and to hear their views. And we're planning, in consultation with ICANN, a series of dialogues. And the next one will be with the Pacific, and then with Central Asia youth, to really hear their thoughts and perspectives. I think that momentum is really gearing us up for the it's a series of conferences that will be taking place in Kazakhstan around the International Day Against Nuclear Tests. There will be a special workshop on the nuclear weapon-free zones, and then the TPNW state parties will gather. On the margins of that meeting, there will be a survivors forum as well as a youth forum that NAPF and RTT is working very closely with STOP, MEI, and other groups to really make sure that young people's voices are heard and will be presented in a form of a declaration to the state parties of the TPNW. So these are just some of our initiatives that we're really working on. And I'm so grateful that we have so many young people here in the audience, as well as really great group of panelists. And I'm so thankful that everyone's here, that everyone has stayed beyond the time to really hear everyone's views and perspectives. And special thanks to Dr. Ivana Hughes, Veronique Grisori, and the chair of the NPT, PrepCom, Ambassador Rakhmatulin, as well, of course, Ambassador Sito of Kiribati, who has been really leading, he's been at the forefront of nuclear justice initiatives for decades. So on that note, I'll stop, and we'll just briefly have Q&A, and thank you so much. Does anyone have a question? Oh, I see we have one, please.
Hi, I'm Thomas, also one of the. Oh, thank you very much. My name is Thomas. I'm a youth activist with Nuclear Peace Foundation and the Youth Initiative Reverse the Trend. I swear this is not a plant. I have a question actually for Benedict, if that's all right. Obviously, you did a huge amount of advocacy work through your own personal work, through a lot of the MEI, the Marcy's Education Initiative. And I'm wondering, obviously there's this issue of raising awareness in the Marshall Islands, which is so important, and there's of course the problem that they haven't yet signed the TPNW, but something that I think about sometimes is this intersectionality. Of course, you live in the United States, you do a huge amount of advocacy around the world. How do you use your initiative to, of course, help educate and assist Marshallese youth, but also American youth around the world?
Thank you, Tom, for the question. And before I answer your question, great delivery, by the way, earlier. Yes, so with the Marshallese Educational Initiative, I mean, one thing that we are trying to work on right now is to try to educate the community about the TPNW. And so we work with the Customary Law and Language Commission in the Marshall Islands, which is the language authority in the RMI. And they were able to help us translate the TPNW into Marshallese. And so that's not made public yet. We're waiting until hopefully the coming weeks to put the translation version of the TPNW into share it online, but also have physical copies to share with President Heinen, ministers, and senators. Because in the past, in my communications with Marshallese lawmakers, I would bring up TPNW and they would not know what I'm talking about. And so there's obviously, if lawmakers don't know about the TPNW, then the rest of the population don't know what the TPNW is. And so our next step, now that the TPNW has been translated, is to reach out to Marshallese lawmakers these upcoming weeks to perhaps schedule meetings with them to talk about the TPNW and just the benefits of it, and especially now that we've been talking a lot lately about an international fund that will help nuclear frontline communities. I know those discussions are still ongoing, but really, language access is very important. Just because a community is impacted by things like nuclear weapons, it doesn't mean that they're aware of everything nuclear. And that also goes with just the nuclear legacy itself. I know it's something that the Marshall Islands National Nuclear Commission, which is an agency under the Marshallese President's Office. This agency was formed 5-6 years ago with the mandate to oversee all nuclear-related issues in the country, but also to educate the Marshallese public, especially the young ones, about our nuclear legacy because unfortunately we don't have a history book that teaches about the U.S. nuclear testing program on the Marshall Islands. And so NNC has actually created a curriculum, and they've implemented starting from kindergarten all the way up to the college level. Of course, they're not going to teach, a student everything all at once. They learn as they grow. And so those are the efforts that NEI and the Marshallese government is taking right now to ensure that people are becoming more aware of the nuclear legacy, nuclear disarmament issues, especially on the TPNW. Thank you.
Any other questions? I see that we have one here. You got a mic?
Thank you, and thank you so much for this really lovely conversation and for sharing your personal stories. I'm Maya, I'm from Norway, I'm from Norwegian Physicians Against Nuclear Weapons, and I think sometimes when we talk about nuclear tests in the work that we do back in Norway, it can sometimes feel quite far away, although Norway is a nuclear weapon endorsing state. We don't have nuclear weapons ourselves, and I'm just wondering if you have any input on how youth in countries like mine can engage with what you do, or other parts of, countries like where I'm from.
Can I first answer this question just in terms of the broader context, and then we can get into the youth? So I think what is very important is to know that Norway voted yes on the resolution on addressing the legacy of nuclear weapons, and was actually what happened was during the consultation there was a small informal group of states which included Norway. So Norway tried very hard, in consultation with both Kiribati and Kazakhstan, to try to get the more, let's say, NATO states, nuclear umbrella states on board. And even though they're not part of the TPNW, because they were involved in nuclear justice, I think there's an avenue to present that to the Norwegians. And at a side event on Monday on complementarity, the Norwegian speaker, the representatives mentioned the resolution and how proud he was that Norway was able to vote yes on it. So that's just using that resolution as an avenue for advocacy could be very key. Any other thoughts?
Well, maybe just want to add, there's this film that's being shown across the U.S. right now by Director Hideki on the impact of the testing that took place in Nevada on Shoshone First Nations lands. But there's always this thought that, you know, nuclear weapons only have, you know, impact certain communities. But what is very interesting with this film that was just shown in Springdale 2 weeks ago was that the testing that took place in Nevada did not just impact communities in Nevada, in the Shoshone Nation and other First Nations, but it impacted the entire U.S. mainland. And towards the end of the film, it also shared a map of the fallout from tests that happened in the Marshall Islands. It did not just impact the Pacific, but again, it went around the world. And so I think the point is nuclear weapons will and have impacted us one way or another. And so we all have a responsibility. I mean, as a Marshallese, I can't separate the issue of nuclear and climate because those are to an existential threat, especially for my country. And so my point here is we need to do all that we can to create a world without nuclear weapons, without nuclear harm, and a livable planet for everyone. I mean, we all want to live on a planet that's healthy, clean, not just for us, but for future generations. And the point that frontline communities have been making since, well, the testing period itself, is that we do not want other communities or countries to have to go through what we're going through. And so we all have a responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see that we have another question. The person with the glasses.
Great, I'm Chuck Johnson. I'm also with IPPNW in the Geneva Liaison Office here. And I just wanted to point out that if you're talking about the Arctic, which includes Norway, Novaya Zemlya was a test site. Not as much is known about that. It's still part of Russia. It's an island, and there was testing done in the 50s, all the way to when the testing ended in '62, above ground testing, and then there was some underground testing done in the 70s. But I'm just have to say I'm super excited by this panel and this entire presentation. It's really very exciting. I'm excited by the momentum that you guys created last year with your resolution. It's mind-boggling. I've never seen a vote like that with the nuclear weapon states that isolated. It's really is kind of mind-boggling, and I'm glad that you're continuing to pursue it and use this as a way to prick people's conscience and really drive home what nuclear weapons really are. You know, they're anti-human, they're anti-life. Even testing them has caused so much pain and horror, you know, and you can make that message and deliver that message. So it makes me really happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? I see that someone from the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, ICANN, has a question or comment.
Thank you. First, apologies for being that person. So yeah, my name is Lynn. I work with the ICANN, so the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons on Articles 6 and 7. But I'm actually going to indulge and ask a question not, well, it's sort of related to that work. But in talking about providing assistance for victims and survivors of nuclear weapons testing use, sometimes I encounter the narrative that we have to support these people because of the sacrifice that they made for our security in the creation of the bomb. And as we all know, atomic bombs are not security This sacrifice was not, it didn't build on anything that we should cherish or build to that. But I also see that could be a difficult story to kind of take away from people who are suffering consequences and not getting sufficient assistance in addressing the consequences. Do you encounter these narratives, and how do you talk around them? Or are these very tiny voices that really aren't part of the conversation in your communities? Feel free to find me at a later stage and talk about this if we can't cover it now. Thank you so much for a wonderful talk. Thank you to all the organizers and hosts.
Who would like to answer?
I also would like to talk later about that, but I will just briefly say that I think that going back to Kazakhstan, I mean, I've spent a year in Germany working, and then I think that always going back makes me realize how very distant and kind of very far away from the reality and the work that is being done in general on a multilateral level. And I think what is very important is that in Kazakhstan, why I talked about the taboo and about silencing, because most of the time people don't want to feel victimized. And that's one of the main parts. That's why, survivors in nuclear frontline community don't owe really anyone their stories. That's something really important to remember, and that's something that, in Kazakhstan, including as well as in Marshall Islands, people didn't know and still don't know what is TBNW or NPT or anything else, and they don't know what part they played. So they don't know about the sacrifice, that happened. They just know that it happened, and they don't receive. So what is very important, yes, we're here and everything, but what's very important is to work on a national level on the legislation. Kazakhstan has legislation from 1992 to support victims harmed by nuclear testing, but it's very outdated. So with the work that is being done, of course, it's important what is happening on the multilateral level or international level, but for many nuclear frontline communities, this is something that they don't really care about or think. It's something that on a national level, if there is something, that is very important. And that's why we don't need to only use these spaces, right? We need to use human rights spaces. That's where we can have alternative reports, encourage states to have better legislations, and to avoid, violations of human rights, and to contribute to redress and justice. So there is a lot into that, and I think that a big part of what is happening right now is actually work nationally, and then of course regionally, the Central Asia. On that particular topic we're talking about, what I will be happy to talk later. I'm sorry, I'm a bit tired. And I think that I can't really speak right now properly in English or any language I know, but yeah, thank you.
Would anyone else? Okay, if not, no, do we have any more questions? I think everyone is tired at this point and they want to go home. It's been a very long day. So on that note, I would like to thank everyone for coming to this event. A shout out to our really great, to Sarah and also to Stella. Thank you both so much. Really amazing that this all came together and that everyone stayed until the very end. So thank you so much. And have a good night.